Mina Kimes from ESPN. This is from the Mina Kimes Show. What she sees as the strength of the Browns defense in 2024.
It was an interesting defense insofar as it wasn't that interesting. They played a lot of cover one and a lot of man coverage, and they rushed with four, which tends to be a pretty good formula in the NFL if you have players who are good enough to do it. They got pantsed in the playoffs, which was my one hesitation for putting them here, because I think they were pantsed in large part because of the simplicity of their scheme. Which was it was a really interesting season because them and Baltimore had like these two wildly different identities and kind of arrived in the same place, and both had success against the San Francisco 49ers. But I do think you saw in the playoff loss to Houston, which when that offense came out and they said, oh, okay, you're going to do exactly what you've done all season. Great. We're going to break all your rules. We're going to, use a lot of motion and man beaters and all this stuff. But part of the reason why I'm not terribly worried, John, by that one performance is that was year one with Jim Schwartz, who was a defensive coordinator. I have to think that year two, they're going to be prepared for more offenses to take that sort of approach against them, and they'll have more success with it. And you really couldn't ask for a better talent pool to work with.
Ashley, so she has the Browns defense again in 2024 ranked number one. I see a lot of where she's going with that.
Yeah, I think not obviously number one, they were the top defense in the regular season last year. And the wild card game is interesting because Houston did take advantage of them. Now, I think it's also really important to note they were pretty banged up at that point, especially at safety in particular. But we know Myles Garrett also dropped off towards the end of the season. He essentially disappeared in that game. And I think that was a big issue. I think that's a big issue that Myles is going to have to contend with this year, because I think coming off of his Defensive Player of the Year performance, the defense is going to go as he goes. And I think while the Houston game is interesting, there were other games, if you watch them closely enough throughout the year, that kind of presented some of those warning signs that I think do give cause for concern coming into this year. And largely, I think, and I've been hammering this point home for months and months and months, it didn't have as much to do with home versus away as it did with the savviness of the veteran quarterbacks that they sometimes had to play on the road. In particular, I'm talking about Russell Wilson when they lost to the Broncos, and Matthew Stafford, who obviously knows Jim Schwartz and his schemes probably better than any quarterback in the league, since Jim Schwartz is the guy who drafted him back when they were both with the Lions. So I think that, to me, is what's so interesting when you can get those quarterbacks who can react really quickly to what they're seeing with the defense and who can get the ball out really quickly. And I think that, for me, was the number one thing you saw them struggle with. But you did see what they did super well, I think, for the most part last year, was rush and coverage working together. You hear them talk about it all the time. So I don't hate them being ranked number one, but I also think it's really important to note, we just recorded a podcast on this today. The quarterbacks that they have to face this upcoming year, if everyone remains healthy, this is the first time the Browns have had to play a second place schedule in a really long time. So it's going to look totally different when you have Dak Prescott and Patrick Mahomes and Tua Tagovailoa coming into town. I mean, there's just going to be more of those sort of veteran, savvy, all-pro, Pro Bowler quarterbacks who your defense is going to have to contend with now. And I think it's going to be a really tough test. We're really going to get a feel for where these guys stand when they have to face some of those guys.